Hi guys, welcome back. We're doing our book, The Prince Warrior by Priscilla Schreier. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background on this. It is a book that has lots of meaning in it. It isn't just a storybook, although it is a fiction story, but it's based on a piece of scripture in Ephesians 6:10-18. And it's about the armor of God. And so I thought I'd read you that, and then I'm going to give you some secrets that happened in the chapter before, in chapter 3, and then we'll start doing that throughout the series so you can pick up some of the underlying meanings to the characters or things that are happening so you can understand a little bit more the depth of this story. So Ephesians 6:10 starts with, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggles are not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything to stand firm with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with righteousness, or with readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints." So as we read this book, you're going to start to see the symbolism of the belt, of the shield, and just seeing how God is there for us. He's given us everything that we need to come against the schemes of the enemy. Now, in chapter 3, there was a conversation. Do you remember the conversation between Evan and his mom? And it was, "Oh, this is a real battle, Evan. There's a sneaky, malicious enemy that you are always in battle with, even now." And he said, "Xavier," his brother, remember? And his mom said, "No, it's not Xavier." "Then who is it?" "It's someone who wants to remain hidden so that you'll forget that he's even there. He'll do everything that he can to make you feel like you will never win." When we read in Ephesians 6:12, it says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against the rulers and authorities of the unseen world." Like Evan, we can easily think of people that are the problem that we can see, and all the while, it's a sinister enemy disguising himself, hoping that you'll forget to fight against him. The real culprit, just because Satan and his forces are invisible, does not mean that they're fictional. So that's what this book is talking about. We're going to go into chapter 4. Now, do you remember chapter 3? We left off where they had gone into the water. Okay? So, it's into the cave. "Am I underwater?" Evan opened one eye. Sure, he wouldn't be able to see a thing in the murk below the water. Something about this water didn't feel like water. It wasn't cold. It wasn't even wet. He slowly opened the other eye and gazed around him at the shimmering world of blue and silver, like white bubbles of light floating lazily, flickering slightly as if catching rays of sunlight from the world above. He raised an arm and found it move freely, not like in the suspended in water. There was no water, he realized. He took a cautious breath. Air filled his lungs. Real air, oxygen. He wasn't underwater at all. In fact, he was completely dry. He was standing, not floating, not swimming, on a floor, a solid floor. Rock? He looked down at his clothes. His torn and muddy pajamas were gone, replaced by a gray suit and a smooth leather-like pants. The symbol from his book about Horatius was emblazoned on the shirt of silver. He touched it and it flickered slightly. Where am I? He turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. A cave? He'd visited a cave once. This place sort of looked like that, with all sorts of random rock formations. What were they called? Stalactites and stalagmites. The stalactites dripped from the ceiling like giant icicles, but these glowed a silvery blue like they were lit from within. The stalagmites rose from the floor like a small glistening mountain ranges. Even the walls had a strange otherworldly glow. What sort of place had he landed in? An undersea cave with no water? And where was Xavier? Evan took a step and then another, hoping to see more of the cave. He noticed several tunnels going off in different directions, but they were completely dark. Was he supposed to go down one of them? He didn't see the little purple guy anywhere. Suddenly, there was a grinding noise, like a garbage disposal trying to chew up something way too big. Evan jumped away, startled, and whipped around to see his brother standing there next to him, completely dry and dressed in the same as him. It was as if the garbage disposal had coughed him up all in one piece. Xavier had a goofy look on his face, like he had no idea what just happened. Made sense. Evan didn't know what was going on either, but he had gotten hit there first. So for once, he had something to brag about. About time you showed up, he said confidently to Xavier. Wouldn't know how rattled he was, so Xavier wouldn't know how rattled he was on the inside. And then under his breath, chicken. Xavier didn't respond to the jibe. He was too busy looking around in slack-jawed wonder at the fantastic glowing formations of this world in which they had found themselves. Is it real? He asked finally, as if he needed help making up his mind. Are we underwater? We went into the water, but we're not in it anymore, Evan said thoughtfully. He had more time to work this out. It's like we went right through the water and ended up here, underneath. Under the water, all dry, and in different clothes? Yeah, cool, Evan said. But hey, if it's a dream, anything can happen, right? What are those? Xavier said, pointing to the flecks of light dancing in random patterns around them, some almost invincible, and others as big as dandelion puffs. Evan reached out to grab one, but it darted away. Welcome to Adhordius, young princes. Both boys jumped. An enormous voice filled the chamber, making the stalagmites and the stalagmites shiver. The little figure in purple robe was before them again, appearing from nowhere, radiating light, its face still in shadow. You are safe here. They assumed it was the creature that had spoken, yet the voice seemed to come from everywhere in the room, like many different echoes converging all at once. How could a thing so small have such a big voice? And yet there was something large about this creature, despite its diminutive size. Something sort of regal, too. Something that made both Xavier and Evan believe what it was saying, we're safe. Evan approached the creature cautiously, hoping to get a better look. It didn't actually move, yet wherever Evan stepped, its face remained hidden. Are you a troll? He asked slowly. Evan, Xavier embarrassed. Evan ignored him. An elf? I am Ruach. Each word was like its own sentence, which made it seem all the more important. Rohu? Evan asked, his nose wrinkling. Ruach, said the purple, trollish, elfish creature in the measured tone. I'm your guide at Adhordius. Ruach, Evan repeated the name, slowly, as if trying to sort out what it meant. Then he turned to his brother and whispered, definitely not a troll. Xavier spoke up, hoping the elf troll, whatever it was, creature hadn't heard his brother's comment. Sir, would you mind just telling us where we are and what we're doing here? You are in the cave, Ruach said in the same deliberate, booming voice. Evan chuckled. Good name for a cave, he said under his breath. Xavier nudged him. You must be properly equipped before you can go further. Follow me. Ruach turned slowly, the glowing emblem of the Adhordius on the back of his robe clearly visible to the boys. Then, all at once, he took off down one of the dark passageways. As he went, the walls and the ceiling lit up in purple lights similar to the purple leaves in the dark forest, revealing shining objects on either side. Xavier wasn't sure he wanted to go any further. Evan, however, was starting to relax, as if ready for an adventure. It was, after all, only a dream. "Armor!" Evan cried, for the objects in the passageway looked very much like armor. "Wow! Sweet!" The sight of the armor made the last of his fears melt away. "Come on, Xav!" And he dashed off after the smallish, not a trollish creature named Ruwak. "Wait," Xavier said. "Do you really think it's safe?" "Hey," Evan replied, "we're in a cave under a lake with a little purple dude that's not a troll. What would be safer?" Xavier hurried to follow his little brother, still not sure if this was the right thing to do, but seeing no option. The tunnel twisted and turned, and sometimes splitting into several more tunnels, sometimes sloping downhill. Unexpectedly, the strange little creature named Ruwak appeared to be in a big hurry, but the boys didn't have trouble keeping up with him. Xavier felt that he was moving much faster than his legs could actually carry him. As the passages lit up, the boys saw that there were hundreds, maybe thousands of suits of armor displayed on either side of them. Breastplates, helmets, belts, boots, shields, swords, all arranged on the wall of the cave. The armor came in endless varieties and appeared to be from many different times in history. In fact, each set was clearly marked with a date on the small silver placard below it: 1649, 1875, 1947, 2013. And the dates went well into the future. There were pieces made of leather and iron and wood and bronze and even some odd-colored material Xavier could not identify. Some were very plain. Some had intricate engravings in the breastplates. The helmets were all different shapes and the sizes too: Roman, Greek, Viking, and some so fantastic he had never seen them in any history books. When they were younger, Xavier and Evan and their friends from their old neighborhood used to play castles and kings in the basement of their apartment building. The basement was dark and shadowy, with crumbling walls that looked to them like the dank stone walls of a real castle. They staged mock tournaments using skateboards for horses and epic battles with swords that they had made from yardsticks and old pieces of baseboard trim that they'd found laying around. They made breastplates out of the cardboard and scraps of aluminum foil. But this armor looked real. Xavier longed to stop and touch it just to make sure, but they were moving too fast. Next to each suit was a heavy door fastened with a large padlock. What was behind those doors? Who ever heard of doors in a cave anyway? Xavier suspected there was something very important and interesting behind them. He longed to know what it was. He was so busy looking at the armor and the doors that he almost crashed into Ruwak, who had stopped suddenly in the middle of the tunnel. Evan wasn't looking either and slammed into Xavier's back before sprawling on the ground with a yelp. Xavier turned around to help him up. "Thanks for the warning," Evan muttered. "Watch where you're going next time." When Ruwak slowly stretched out his arms, Xavier hadn't realized he had arms. They were far longer than the rest of him, but draped in purple so that his hands were not visible. He was pointing towards the armor beside him, which lit up as if in a spotlight. Evan crept closer to get a better look. "Hey, that's my name," Evan said in surprise, pointing to the placard where his full name and birth date was written in fancy gold lettering. "And that's yours, Xav. They have our names on them, and our birthdays too. Awesome!" Xavier looked and saw his own name and birth date in the same gold lettering next to another set in armor. Wow, there it was, his very own armor. But the armor didn't look like armor at all, at least not like the kind Xavier had ever seen before. The breastplate was white, made of a smooth plastic-looking material, and vaguely triangular, like some sort of space-age dinner plate. There was a large round orb in the center, kind of a purple-gray, A wide belt hung just below the breastplate, plain white without even a buckle. The boots sat on their own little shelf at the bottom. They were white and of the same material as the breastplate, very smooth and plain. Beside the breastplate and the belt was a large golden shield, and with a weird emblem in the center, a white rounded helmet, not unlike a bike helmet, but sleeker, with less padding and a curvy edge. It sat above the breastplate. Hanging above all the pieces, just out of reach, was a long, elegant sword, the tiny emblem of a Hortius engraved in the golden hilt. Both boys stared at their armor, examining every piece. Before either could ask another question, Ruach spoke. When you come to a Hortius, you must put on your armor as quickly as possible. You cannot be here without it. You can always find it in the cave, and you must enter the cave through the water. It's the only way. Do you understand? The boys stared blankly at Ruach for a moment or two. This doesn't look like real armor, said Evan, finally, clearly disappointed. Xavier was thinking the same thing, but he never would have spoken it out loud. You will never have victory in a Hortius unless you are equipped, Ruach continued, ignoring Evan's comment. But this is just a dream, right? Just an imaginary place, Xavier said with a knowing nod, trying to convince himself. Ruach tilted his hooded head down and cocked it in to the left a little. His right arm rose to a chest level and rested where his heart might have been. A Hortius is a real world, he said, and here you are who you always are supposed to be. You are Prince Warriors. Prince Warriors, Evan perked up. Prince Warriors, like in my book. Cool. I think you might have the wrong people, said Xavier, shaking his head. I mean, we're just kids. We're not princes, and we're definitely not warriors. Here in a Hortius you are, Ruach said. His voice was softer now, almost whispery, although Xavier could not quite figure out which direction it came from. The world you live in day to day, the world is but a shadow of the real world. This is the world where the battles rage, where your real enemies lie. Evan's ears perked up. He suddenly remembered the talk he had had with his mom before he went to bed. Battles? An enemy? An enemy who is not Xavier? What kind of battle? Evan asked suddenly. You like battles, do you? Ruach's voice had changed, becoming softer and yet more definitive. Evan knew he was talking about the battles between his brother and him, like the fight on the dock. He glanced at Xavier, who was looking at the ground as if he knew it too. You must learn who your real enemy is, Ruach said, his voice even softer. Evan felt a chill at the tone. Your real enemy. Up there above the water, the trees and stuff, Evan whispered. What was all that? What did you see, Ruach asked. It got darker and darker, and the trees were falling, and the whole world was falling apart. Chaos, Xavier said suddenly, remembering the word he had looked up earlier that evening. Tumult, chaos, the riot act. Chaos is the work of the enemy, Ruach responded with a nod of his hood as he approved of Xavier's assessment. The enemy will do everything in his power to distract you, to discourage you, to delay you, to defeat you. He is always near in Hortius. This is his dwelling place. The evidence of his schemes is much more apparent in Hortius than it is on earth, which is why you must be properly equipped when you are in this realm. The victory you achieve here will determine the outcome of the battles you face there. What's behind those doors? Evan asked. He'd started nosing around. Is it a dungeon or something? Can we see? In good time. What about the sword? Can I try it out? It looks pretty heavy. Belt first. Ruach gestured toward the belt that hung on the wall. Evan reached out to touch it. No, Ruach said, but too late. As Evan's fingers grazed the belt, there was a flash of light, and he was propelled backward and knocked to the ground. He let out a soft "oh" and winced in pain. You okay? Xavier asked, rushing over to help him. I'm fine, Evan said, turning away from his brother and shaking out his hand as if he'd been burned. He struggled to his feet. No big deal. Xavier backed away, looking at his brother with concern. Although he seemed okay, he'd been knocked back pretty hard. And what was that flash? That must have hurt. The armor must be received. I must give it to you. Then it is your responsibility to put it on and use it, Ruach said. He took the belt from the wall and held it up. Strange symbols appeared on its plain surface. As Evan and Xavier stared, the symbols began to pulse and shift and became a word. Truth. Why does it say truth? Evan asked. The belt holds everything together. Ruach offered no explanation for the cryptic response. He handed the boys their belts. Xavier took his, not sure what to do with it. There was no way to buckle it. He waited for instructions, but Ruach said nothing. He looked at Evan, who held the belt this way and that, trying to figure out how it was supposed to fit. Finally, Xavier gave up and wrapped it around his waist, like he would a belt for a bathrobe. As he did, the belt seemed to take on a life of its own, snaking around his body and conforming to his size. The two ends fused together so perfectly that the edges were invisible. Whoa, said Evan. Sweet. He was eager to try it himself. He wrapped the belt around his waist, and it fitted him just as Xavier's had. He glanced at Xavier and grinned, as if to say, dream right. Ruach then took down Xavier's breastplate and handed it to him. Xavier looked at it doubtful. It didn't have any straps to buckle, but then neither did the belt, and that worked, so he placed it against his chest. Instantly, he felt it changing, shaping, conforming to his size, just as the belt had. The breastplate stuck to him like it had been sewn on, fitting perfectly. He waited for it to do something, for the orb to light up or flash or display a word, but nothing happened. He was a little disappointed. This thing will never stop an arrow or a sword blow, Evan said after putting on his own breastplate. It's not even metal. It's like plastic or something. Plus, it's too small. Doesn't even cover my whole middle. What good is it for? He looked at the non-trollish guy, hoping for a real answer this time, but there wasn't one. Xavier didn't say so, but he sort of agreed. The breastplate seemed more like a nifty fashion accessory, something a futuristic space ninja would wear, than a functional piece of armor. Maybe it changes when you go into battle, Xavier thought. He hunted around on the breastplate for an on switch, and he didn't see one. Boots, Ruach handed both the boys their boots, which they hurried to put on. Despite not having any laces or buckles, the boots slid on easily, conforming to the boys' feet, just as the belts had. They were pretty comfortable and even had ventilation slats by the ankles, so it was easier to walk. Evan took a few practice steps, but he wasn't overly impressed. Great. Now do we get the swords? Evan, Xavier warned. You have everything you need, said Ruach finally, and that was it. Ruach moved towards them. Remember, these 3 pieces you must wear at all times when in Hordius. Do you understand? Okay, but what about the swords? Evan asked. He was trying hard not to sound impolite, but it didn't seem right that they should get all 3 pieces, only not the rest. Did Ruach expect them to go into battle half-dressed? Battles in Hordius do not look the same as battles on Earth. Therefore, they cannot be fought the same, Ruach said, as if he had read Evan's mind. That is something you will learn, Prince Evan. You too, Prince Xavier. But why us? Xavier asked. Why are we here? You were chosen. Ruach paused, and the cadence of his words changed, slower, sadder. Many are chosen, but few come. Maybe they would if the armor looked a little more armorish, Evan said sarcastically. He glanced at Xavier, laughing a little, but stopped when he saw the disgusted look on his brother's face. Xavier let out a long breath. He wished Evan would stop saying everything that came to his mind. So what do we do now? Evan continued in less sarcastic tone of voice. Hang around here until this enemy comes along? You will soon see. First, we must go and get the others. Ruach spun around swiftly and began to do that funny walk, run, waddle thing that he did down the winding tunnel. What others? Cried Evan as the boys took off after Ruach. You mean there are more? Chapter 5. Okay, I guess we're done. The guys are waving at me, so we will finish here. And next week we'll find out what's happening with these guys, what the next part of the adventure, and who they're going to find. I hope that you guys have a great week. Remember that God has made you to be who you are, to be where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be doing what he wants you to do. Pray, read your Bible, and we will see you next week for chapter 5. Talk to you later.